All right, everybody. What an exciting day it is for me today. We get to have Chris Bentson on the show with us. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
It's a blast. Yeah.
So, as I like to start off our shows, one of the things that I really like is in the event, this is going to be hard, but in the event that somebody doesn't know who you are or has not heard your name or does not know about the company, I'd love it if you would just give us just a quick synopsis of who you are, how you got into our industry. You've been a major contributor to where we're at now, within our industry. But then also talk to us a little bit about the company, Bentson Copple as well.
Oh, great. Thanks, Jill. First, great to see you and congratulations on what you've built. There's a whole new generation of consultants out there, and you're just expanding and doing great things. You're everywhere where I look, and I know you're busy, but congratulations. So, I guess I'll start off with, occasionally I'll get confused as a doctor. I am not one, and it won't be too long. I don't have to talk too long for people to figure that out, but I'm not an orthodontist. Believe it or not, got involved with orthodontics in 1988, a long time ago. And I rocked out of the practice management cradle in Atlanta. It was an interesting city for orthodontists because we had OrthoTrack, we had OPMS, we had TOPS, we have, a few other programs out of there. But there was a lot happening in orthodontics in Atlanta. I was with OPMS. We ended up rolling that over 15 years to kind of no clients to 1,000. We started aggregating, and we kind of merged with OrthoTrack and a company called OrthoWare and some other orthodontic companies. Actually, they added some dental companies. A lot of people don't know, I commuted for a year from Atlanta to Connecticut, ran an oral surgery practice management company.
I did not know that. Wow.
During that time. And ultimately, what's now the Carestream set of products bought us. It was a Kodak buyout at that time, but now the Carestream set of products with OrthoTrack is that kind of flagship product. So first 15 years of my career, that's what founded me in understanding, some of the fundamentals that, you have to teach, which is, how do you post a check? How do you do insurance? How do you set up a scheduling template? I was pretty adept back in the day at those kinds of things with the tools we had. But then I got married and we had 3 kids, Irish triplets, boom, boom, boom. And we were in Atlanta and, just hated the holidays because I grew up in the Midwest. She was from North Carolina. We did the every other year thing. And one year, our transmission in our Ford Explorer blew up with 3 kids and a dog and a cat. And we looked at each other and said, we're not doing this again.
I know.
And so we decided to move closer to a set of parents just to make that part easier. Her side won, and that's usually the way that goes. And that's how I got to North Carolina. So I was kind of a man without a country. I loved ortho. That's what I wanted to do. And I did some consulting for some different companies. OrthoCAD was one of them that ultimately sold their, scanner to Align. So that was an interesting time. But there was an orthodontist in this town, Jerry Clark, who had a company that did valuations and transitions. I bought that business from him. And that's how I got into valuations, transitions. We then added recruiting. We then added kind of some OSO space work. And, that company is 10 people today. I'm very different than the other ones. But, we're a very typical small business that has the same struggles that orthodontic independent owners have. But I know what it's like to be in a partnership. We're 40-40-20. So we share that way in the business. Myself, Doug Copple, and Shannon Patterson. We've expanded our business. Our revenue per FTE is just really incredible. And we have really, really smart people. So we're kind of the ones, if you want to change ownership or do an associate or sell your practice or think about a corporate deal, people call us. But because of that, we only work with orthodontists kind of the first day of their career or the last. And so we kind of developed, at least my part of the business was, let's be a voice for what's happening in the orthodontic space for all those years in between. And so I spent a lot of time on the road talking about what's happening in the industry. And that's kind of what I became known for. And I think I saw my schedule. Laura put a sheet together for me yesterday, 45 presentations last year, 40 in person on top of 15 client, personal visits. And I get a lot of help from the other members of the team here, but I'm on the road once a week talking about orthodontics to some group. Or doing something like this. And,
Yep.
and I love it. It's fun. I've got involved in organized orthodontics. I'm president of the AOF, and I'll roll off of that in May of 2024. So that's been a blast. Have a good voice with the board of trustees. And it's just been an incredible ride. So it's kind of my time to start fading out. And it's great to see, like I said, people inside my business rise up, Shannon and Doug, and people like Jill Allen and your whole set of associates and consultants out there that are really taking the baton and it will be the next generation of leaders here. So fun time. Just thrilled to be on the ride with orthodontists. What a great group.
Yeah, for sure. And what as we have come to work together over the years, I mean, definitely you are, I think, the sage in our industry, where if you want to know about what's happening, you want the pulse on what's going on, Chris is the one who's going to be helping with that. And I've had, also just such a great time with Shannon, because I do work a lot with those, acquisitions and whatnot. And, just knowing that there's a great resource out there when I've got docs that are, I don't know if I want to do a startup. I don't know if I want to do an acquisition. Well, you guys are a perfect match for that. So I really think you guys have met the need, found a niche within our industry. And as you know, it's not going away. It's definitely something that docs need, a solid resource. And definitely in my mind, you guys are that resource. So thank you.
That.
Yeah. So I want to kind of come at this podcast a little bit from more of that younger doctor perspective a bit. And again, knowing that you, I think, are the data guy, you can kind of, give us some good insight into that. I have a lot of times when my docs are, making this decision. First, it's, should I even be doing a startup? I don't know. Are there practices to buy? Where's our industry going? And I'm not going to get too much into that today, because I think that you're speaking a lot on that already. But some of the things that I get a lot of questions about is more of the in the business questions. And that's where I'm hoping you and I can just kind of go along a little trail here, and we can maybe have you help quell some concerns that I think younger doctors, when they become business owners, have. So are you ready to go down that little?
Let's give it a go. What do you got?
So the first thing I want to talk about, and I think that this is like the backbone for our practices, is a little bit about our P&Ls, so our profit and loss statements. And I think for younger doctors, that's scary. And I'm not looking at you as a CPA, so I'm not going to be asking tax questions and all of that. But I do know that when younger doctors, or doctors in general, and maybe we can talk about younger, and then if a practice is selling, like in your mind, if a doctor's looking at this, what are healthy overhead numbers? Kind of what should doctors be looking for? And I'm sorry, I'm shooting you two questions. So let's start with, if they were going to do an acquisition and they're looking at, numbers that maybe are being provided to them. Can you talk a little bit to what would look like or be healthy, or what would be red flags?
Sure. And first I'll back up just kind of the essence of the market that you explained. A myth that I am going to try to dispel this year is that the golden age of orthodontics is over, because I just don't believe it. It's there for you all day long. People are worried about a lot of things. And orthodontists are good worriers.
Right?
One bad month and the whole world is falling apart. But, I've lived through 4 recessions in my career. We bounce out of them in a great way. It's difficult while you're in them to grow and so forth. But independent ownership in solo or small group practice is there for you all day long. as far as I can see. So that's the good news. Corporate's there. It's less than 10%. It's going to be bigger. So you can have both. And it's providing a place for you to land out of school with a lot of debt. And then, buyers of practices that you ask about acquisitions, they're not out of school anymore. They're 2, 3, 4, 5 years out of a job. And so a little bit more financially stable and, a little smarter, a little faster with their hands and things like that. So if you, to answer your question, what is a healthy overhead? Today, on average, if you take out all the things you can legitimately run through your practice, depending on your threshold of risk and that of your CPAs, what it really costs to turn the lights on, pay the people, pay the lab bills, pay the bracket bills, pay the mortgage to yourself or the lease to yourself, it's about 58 to 60% of what you collect. And so it's broken down, easily into 4 buckets. And the first is people. And for really all my career and the 50 years before that, last 80 years in orthodontics, that was 25% plus or minus. And then it's supplies, and those supplies historically were bracket spans, ligatures, wires, and now maybe some lab fees. And that's been running at 100% bracket practice at 8%, 20 or 30% aligners at 14%, something like that. Then you have what we call business management expenses, and that's everything from your credit card bills to your accounting fees to the magazines we used to have in our reception area to all that kind of stuff.
Music now?
Yeah, postage, our website maintenance and all that kind of stuff. That runs 10%. And then you have to have a place to see patients. And so the last bucket is occupancy. And this is either the lease rate you pay to someone else or the lease rate you pay to yourself if you own the building, plus janitorial services and snow removal and landscaping and utilities, things like that. That runs between 7 and 10%. So you add those buckets up, you get to 60%. And so you need to know what the ranges of reality are in those buckets. And you don't want to be the doctor that acquires a practice that has 30%, overhead on people expenses and all of a sudden start shooting people. That's not a great place to start.
Right, right.
And you don't want to be, really, really concerned. What you're mostly concerned about when you buy a practice, because you already have debt, and then you're going to have more debt that we think is good debt to buy the practice, but you're concerned about cash flow. Can I afford to run this practice? And then, so you need to know, I think in the future, what we're going to migrate to is today, 30% of our case starts in America are with some kind of lab fee-based product. Tomorrow, that's going to be more. Day after tomorrow, it'll be more. And I see it migrating over the next decade to 70% of those will have a lab-based product and 30% will be traditional braces.
Yes.
And that won't just be aligners. It will be mass digital customized braces with Lightforce, KLO, and, ODO, some of those companies. And so, that's where we're going is more towards this heavier lab fee-based P&L. And that's where all the pain is. And so you have to kind of know where they are in their digital cycle, what you want to do. If you're doing a startup, it's really hard to say. It's easy to say, I want to be all digital because, that generation wants that. They love that, but it's expensive. And so you need to be a hybrid for a while and then migrate to it, I think. But the things that are red flags for me is how much are they spending on people? Is that staff willing to go forward in the digital age? Or do I have a bunch of, people that have been there 25, 30 years that have great relationships, but aren't really comfortable with where the vision is to take it?
Yep.
What is my overhead? I want to be making at least 40 cents on every dollar I collect. And if I'm making less than that, what changes do I need to make and how easy it is to make that change? And I would say, the trend line is super important. We look at the last 3 full years and the current year when we do evaluation, because if the trend line is going like this, it is really difficult, expensive, and a longer term project to turn that around to this than it is to pick one of these or one of these. It doesn't have to be going straight up, but 0 to 3% growth, I'm happy with year over year in today's environment. And I would want to look at those trend lines a lot. We do look at contract receivable. A lot of buyers get hung up on that. Hey, it's too low, it's too high. Everybody has some paid in fulls. Yeah, you're going to have to treat some people for free. You need to not make many changes on the team, in my opinion, the first year.
Agreed. Yeah.
They have relationships, bankers ask me all the time, how can you take an orthodontist out of school who's seeing 12 people a day and have them run this practice that's seeing 60, 70, 80 people a day, sometimes more, sometimes less. And I said, it's the team. The team can run the business and tell the doctor where to go and a lot of times what to do. And so it just takes a while. So don't make a lot of changes. And then you've got to figure out what your modality is going to be, what your voice is going to be. So how do you do this most effectively? Don't buy a dog unless you get a really inexpensive price, because it takes a while to get the fleas off.
And I love that.
Buy something healthy. I think scale is important. Anything under $1 million is harder to take to 2 million than a 1.5 to take to 2 million. And you want to be north of 2 million to really put your foot heavily in the digital space and be profitable, because there is some economies of scale in digital that help a lot. And then I think you really need a sensei. I talk about this all the time. I mean, I use the example, if you go to Everest and you want to summit and you don't have a Sherpa, they won't let you up because there's too many casualties. And so what you do with your company, what so many other great consultants do, is you carry the doctor up the mountain so they don't get hurt on the way up. And so you can see the view and enjoy the view and, have a better experience. And so I think the best money a young orthodontist can spend, and we didn't talk about this beforehand, so I'm not, being, crazy about this, but I mean, you need to hire somebody that can help you get there. And, practice that you buy that's in chaos will stay in chaos. And so the fundamental systems that you teach and know, once those get settled down and you get the right team and they know what their job is and they're being measured correctly, we can then grow that business, but you can't grow a chaotic business. So, hire a consultant, hire a transition expert. There's men to choose from, not just me. And make sure you understand what you're buying and it's a fair value. And just know that the margin should be about 40 cents on every dollar, however deep in digital it is. That's all doable. And then decide what your voice to the community is going to be and go from there. But it's a beautiful thing. You just need some help. And most orthodontists are scientists, and so they're not business people. Some are, but very few.
Yeah, no, that's great, and such good insight, I think, there for docs out there listening about what we should be looking for with those just markers when we're looking at doing that acquisition and purchasing a practice. And I'm going to agree with you on all points, even to the point of I do think it's helpful for docs to have a consultant, whether it's myself or anybody else, but just having somebody to help lead you through that and navigate those rough waters. Because I always tell docs, there is, in my opinion, no harder thing to do than to take over a practice. Even doing startups, I think the risk tolerance is different, but the stress level of taking over another practice and, you're taking on somebody else's team and, all that goes along with that, you gotta be prepared for that. And if you can set yourself up with the right practice that makes that maybe just a little less stressful and, gets you to the end a little bit quicker. So one of the things I was thinking about as you were saying this was, I'm sure you've heard this, comparison is the thief of joy, right? And I see this all the time with my startups, my young docs that, they're getting going with their practice and they're, having their first meetings, maybe with their CPAs and all of this. And they're looking at these numbers, and I promise we're going to move away from P&Ls, but I think you can kind of quell maybe some of this fear, maybe with younger docs, but I see that they look at these numbers and they go, well, I hear that I'm supposed to have a 50% overhead, and I'm a brand new practice that, just, got out of school, and I just did this big lease, and I have this big loan for the next 10 years. And they're beating themselves up over where I'm at in year maybe 1 through 5 versus where I'll be at year 10 through 15. And I'm wondering if we could just get a little sage advice from you, and you could maybe they can hear it from me, but I think coming from you, can you speak to that just a little bit?
you're the expert on startups. I'm not, and that's the one area in orthodontics that I don't know so much about. I kind of have a track of how I think things are supposed to go the first 3 or 4 years. But I do know this, that if I'm doing a startup, and I'll go to acquisitions in a minute, but if I'm doing a startup, your P&L means nothing for the first 3 to 5 years.
That's what I want. Just say that one more time, Chris. Just say that one more time.
It just means nothing. What you need to do is have at least enough of a capital line to put food on the table, or at least enough profit in the practice to pay your school debt note, however you've got that managed. And that usually will be on some kind of, income-based debt repayment plan. So it won't be that bad. And then live. And then you're really reinvesting everything you're making beyond that back into the business.
Yes.
You're hiring people, you're deciding your footprint, your modality on the community, your consultant, your technology depth, how you're going to practice. And to this comparison thing, what we do is we get on the Orthopreneur's website and we anonymously ask a question, and we get a lot of good feedback, quite honestly. But it's a fairly myopic view, and I see incredibly great 100% Medicaid practices. I see really good lifestyle, $1.2 million, happiest people that I know practices. I see some really struggling, I got a $3 million practice and I'm growing 15% year over year and I'm miserable. So you got to decide what you want. And then you've got to decide what that voice is going to be. You start to put these foundational systems in place with the help, hopefully, of a consultant so they're right. Because we make a lot of mistakes as business owners. I have over the years. And they're expensive, and they're, emotionally expensive. And so, to the extent you can minimize that. But, my advice would be these first 5 years of a startup are cowboys and Indians. What you want to see is growth. And, and when the growth stops, you can start managing the business that you've built and then decide, can it grow some more? Can it not? What do I need to do? It's more strategic then. But at first, it's just, you need to be out there growing this business and have a plan for that and have a vision in your head about what does my business look like in my head? And then not assume that your staff are mind readers and can know what that is. You have to tell them. And you can't just tell them once, you have to tell them every day. And that's what we're not so good at from a leadership standpoint as doctors is we think our team knows what's in here if we tell them maybe once, but a lot of times we don't. And a lot of times we go to a meeting and hear a great idea and we come back and we say, we're going to do this. And we're frustrated when it doesn't really fly because we don't understand the why. We don't explain the why. So, there's a lot of leadership skills that need to be developed when you're young in business. And that's very, very important. But, the first 5 years of a startup, don't worry about your P&L, just pay your bills and put food on the table and save 10%. That's my advice there. If you do a startup, Gasper Lazera, who was a co-founder of OCA, a company with, kind of a colored past, but he told me many times, he said, Chris, it is way more profitable to buy bricks than it is to buy a culture. And by that, he meant, changing a culture is hard. And when you buy a practice, you have 25, 30, sometimes more years of that team, that community going to that doctor and changing those habits and changing that work pattern and having you be the good person out of that deal is difficult. And so, that's hard to do. So, I kind of wish more people would start up. I think it's more exciting. It's what you want from the beginning. It's the equipment you want. It's the only advice I have on a startup is in today's modern day orthodontic practice, I think you only need 4 chairs, maybe 5. I think you can do it in 2,400 square feet. And you've got to keep your occupancy expense minimal. I would spend more on the front than I would on the back because that's where, primarily the moms are more comfortable and, create that kind of coffee house feel in the front and do the work in the back, not keep it too big. So sometimes I see people get upside down on startup because they built an 8-chair office or a 3,800 square foot office when they had no patients. So always grow. Building that first building 10 or 15 years in is an exciting project and fun, but don't do it on day one.
That's great.
Yeah, the mistakes on acquisition are, if you're buying a practice that got 7,000 square feet and they got 9 chairs, but they only schedule for 4 of them because that's where the business is, what am I going to do with that building? And do I want this? And is this too much of a project? So maybe I start up across the street, maybe not so friendly, but you can probably do just as well or better.
Yeah. Yeah. Such good advice. I'm going to echo everything you just said. I completely agree with you. And, right now, I tell docs, minimum 1,500, max 2,500 square feet, put money where our money-making rooms are. And, I believe that the concept of shared time, not only with aligners, but just with digital technology, the custom brackets, all of that is the future. And so we should really be thinking more about remote monitoring and different ways to still see our patients over longer periods of time. And so I think in turn, that means we don't have to have all these chairs either. So I completely agree with you and what I'm seeing in the industry from our startups as well. And that kind of leads me into, I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are. I feel like I'm seeing changes and I'm predicting that we're going to see less and less employees in our office, and we're probably going to see more outsourced and hybrid employees. And I think there's going to be effects in the practice, but I think we're also going to see that maybe in how we look at things, even, and I don't want to just make this about P&Ls, but even on that. But I'm kind of curious to know what your thoughts are and what you're seeing in as you're looking at practices, maybe even in how practices have evolved as they're getting to the end of their life cycle, and what doctors may be looking at when they're evaluating a practice.
Yeah, I was with a group of doctors in West Palm Beach a couple of weeks ago, and we had 20 doctors in there, very, very high-end docs practices. And I started by going in a room and said, what's your number one problem in your business? And the first 10 said staffing issues. And then I said, okay, no one else can say staffing issues. But then the next 10 said, well, after staffing issues, and staffing is a big, big, big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it goes away, maybe it doesn't go away. Maybe it's a forever thing. I can't tell on that. But, this concept of every once in a while I'll run into a practice and I'll say, your financial coordinator lives in San Diego and your practice is in Minnesota. And they're like, yeah.
And it works great.
Yeah. And so, it's been pretty rare, but I think the pandemic, I don't want to say there's a silver lining at all out of the pandemic, but if there's some things we learned, one of them is how, the consumer is resilient. Two, virtual has a role in the future, actually played a bigger role in 20 and 21 than it's playing today, because we're getting comfortable and going back into these old ways. But, virtual, as you alluded to, will be a big part of the future. And I think staff retention is an issue that hybrid and remote staffing can be a partial solution for. We can't remotely have chair sides, but we can remotely have just about every other business function of our office to some degree if we want to. We're really, really early into that right now. But you think about the front desk can do remote. You think about, to a certain extent, new patient exams and TCs can do some things remote. We can do insurance remote. We can do financial remote. We can do marketing remote. And so it allows us actually to expand the excellence of our staffing pool.
Yes.
If we don't make them to come in. And if you have a hybrid model, which I am seeing some experimentation on, where certain parts of these back office roles don't have to come in every day, your client satisfaction level goes way up. And that's important from a staff retention point of view. So we're going to see a change. I think you're probably much more of an expert than I on with regards to outsourcing people. I don't see how yet that's not showing up in the vows we're doing, because most of the people that do vows are older, they're my age, and we're like not going to go there.
Yeah. Well, and to an extent, why do they need to? I mean, I work and help like you with docs that are thinking of getting to retirement, and we're working on bringing their numbers up and for the 3 years so they can sell. And what I hear all the time is, yeah, Jill, I can maybe see that, but why should I do that? I'll let the new doc do that when they come in. I'll get them set up so that they can move in that direction.
I would agree with that. And, I think we are going to see for the first time incrementally over the next decade. I'm seeing evaluations right now. Our orthodontic supplies with our brackets and lab fees will exceed our people costs. And doctors see that on their P&L and they get really, really uncomfortable, but that will be the standard in 2030. And so we're going to have to get more efficient with people. And for the first time with Mass Digital customized braces, we'll have the ability to start every case with a scan. And then doctor says braces, hybrid, aligners.
Yep.
But we can actually, for the first time, have a digital workflow versus we have a digital workflow and we have an analog flow, and those two aren't efficient together.
Yeah. And Chris, I'll just put this in here. Here's what I'm seeing in my last 2 years of doing startups now. The change that I've been seeing is we are picking right from the beginning, my startups. It isn't even we're doing bracket orders anymore. It's what is your aligner modality going to be? What is your custom bracket going to be? Maybe you're going to do a lingual of some sort, and then what are you going to choose for your phase one? And so these docs are starting right from the beginning, starting the digital workflows right from the beginning. Like, what a better time to start than when you got a lot of time on your hands, right?
Right.
And like you said, the biggest thing that we overcome is lab fees, but we're also working on, adjusting that right from the beginning so that we aren't upside down. So definitely, I agree with you. I think we're going to be seeing different numbers, different, just where things are landing on our P&L differently in the next 10 years than where they're at right now.
I do want to make one point before we move on that is often overlooked, I think. The biggest thing that I'm seeing is, we're going from a haves to a have more. I don't ever want to say orthodontists a have not, because they're not, but the average independently owned practice today is $1.6 million, 54 years old, 24 years at 60% overhead. That's the middle of the road. But with this new kind of platform, you can have actually fewer work days and do 2.5 to 3 million one doctor. And so, part of what we're going to see over the next 10 years is bigger practices leveraging economies of scale so they can operate efficiently in the digital space and actually be happier inside the practice. And so bigger practices are going to occur as well.
Yeah, it's exciting because I see that too. I think that is exactly where we're going, and technology is taking us there. I mean, we've just got so many tools to help with that. So, any big major changes you see coming to? I mean, we've been kind of talking along, about this, in the last few minutes here. But anything that you're seeing that's really you think listeners need to know about?
Well, I think just first raise an eyebrow every time you hear from a podium and a speaker talking about AI. Everybody wants to talk about that right now. It's in vogue and so forth. Very few companies actually leverage that to the advantage of the doctor. And so, don't be fooled by thinking, this is an AI company when it's really not. But AI will change many, many things in the future. So we've touched on most of them. I think the biggest movement on the clinical side will be Mass Digital customized braces. That's brand new. That's where Invisalign was 25 years ago. So the product's not awesome yet, but it's going to get incrementally better year over year. Yep. And I think pretty much every bracket company will have some kind of mass digitally customized offering by 2030. And so, what happens to metal brackets? I think ultimately they look like high pull headgear. And does that mean they don't work or they're bad? People at my age get really take me to task on that. I go, no, they work great. High pull headgear probably works better than the systems that we have in place now, but the consumer won't buy it. And, I don't think you'll see pictures of people in 2030 and beyond with metal braces on. They'll have ceramic braces on that are mass digitally customized, or if they're still with a braces company that's not custom, it'll be an aesthetic product. And then, you're going to see the aligner companies. There's 100 aligner companies today on the globe. 100.
Wow.
That's crazy, right? So aligners are going to grow, and that's the way it's going to head. So your P&L is going to change. You got to be smarter. And I think the big practices, the good practices, the ones that have the happiest doctors and, are able to do things like have been done for generations. The generation back here is going to look at these guys and go, I wish I was practicing now. So that's why this, the golden age of orthodontics isn't over, but it takes a smarter orthodontist, not just clinically, but also, business wise. So you're going to have a consultant in your life. You're going to have master digital customized braces. You need to experiment with them now to decide which ones you want to use and what's good for you. You need to decide on your aligner and your phase cases for sure. And I think you need to do better with virtual. I think it's clear that the consumer, the teledentistry, if you want, is going to be part of the equation in the future. We leveraged that pretty good in COVID because we had to, but we've gotten away from it. But you can sift a lot of cases. And I think the last thing that's going to be very different is, I think you're a fan of, retainers for life, but I mean, we're going to be able to monetize the patient through the life of through their entire life. I'm talking with aligners in my mouth right now at 61 years old. If I was still in Overland Park, Kansas, I'd go back to my orthodontist. I'm not, but there's going to be a way to track people through their entire life that were with you. And most of those stay in town for their entire life, a lot of them. And so if we know and our door is open and those people can come back, and if we can monetize retainer, there's going to be a lot of talk about the lifetime value of a patient.
Yes.
And I think that's a real thing, and it's going to make us more profitable. I don't think it makes us greedy. I think it's making us smart. A lot of people don't want to come back and have their orthodontist retreat them, so they go to a direct-to-consumer company because they're embarrassed they didn't wear their retainer. If we keep that communication line open and we communicate with them, say it's okay, this happens. When you drive your car off the lot 10 years later, it needs a tune-up. You're going to need one too. So, I think we're going to get smarter about that. And then the lifetime value of a patient will actually increase, and our relationship with patients will be lifetime. A lot of consultants in my day said, get the patient in, get them out, have one retainer visit and bye, because we didn't want them coming in. Well, we can do that virtually now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a good at-home job for somebody.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, again, this, remote monitoring is something that is going to be part of our practice, whether it's through treatment or at the end, like you're talking about. I think these SAS programs, whether it's retainer programs or bleaching programs or I've got some docs that are doing Botox and lip fills. And, I believe we are going to continue to just look for other avenues that aren't just a 24-month, long in one and done, type of a treatment. So I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. So as we kind of finish up here, and if you had some advice for somebody who's thinking of doing a startup or an acquisition, what are maybe like 3 things you might think they should be paying attention to right now?
Yeah, I think for startups, the number one thing I want to have with the startup is a reasonable budget. I don't want to be too tight, but I certainly don't want to be too loose. And so you need somebody to help you with that. It needs to be cool, hip, and attractive for today's to be relevant. So, I don't know what that number is. I'm saying to orthodontists, to residents, 350 to 400. I think you can do okay with that. Sometimes that seems a little low, sometimes high, I don't know, but that's kind of what I express. You may have a different number. I think early hires as you're growing are critical. I think orthodontists, hire people they like, and people they think have skill sets instead of maybe teaching them the skill sets. Again, you probably have more information on that, but
Sure.
And then I think really the place we spend the least amount of time as business leaders is in business planning. And so, I think for me, the best way to do it is to be alone and to really picture in my brain what I want my business to look like, and then transfer that to goals on paper, and then to express those to my teams such that they know what they are, and I hear them having conversations actually with it, whatever their role is around those goals. And I think if you can do that on a more routine basis than you probably do, you'll be happier. Your team will be happier. Your team wants to please you, but they can't do that if they don't know what you want and what makes you happy. So they need to be an expression of what's in your brain, and we need to spend more time planning about what we want that to look like, and then more time expressing that to our team. So I think leadership skills are the other 3 places I'd be the most concerned if I was doing a startup. I think very similarly on an acquisition, you got to buy it right. You don't need to change a lot. You need to decide what you're going to change after after you got your arms around it, and you probably need a consultant to help you with some of that. But pretty basic 1, 2, 3s,
That's great.
Just don't try to do this yourself. And the worst ones I've been involved with on my acquisition side is, I had a classmate that was a CPA that's now with an accounting firm, and he or she is going to be my person. And I'm like, oh my gosh, find somebody who's done this before.
understands our industry. That's great. Well, Chris, this has been just wonderful. You just gave us so many pearls throughout this episode, and I hope that I'll be able to pick your brain again, maybe in the future here.
Anytime. You guys are incredible.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to find out more about Bentson Copple, maybe they're a doc out there listening who's like, gosh, I don't know how I didn't know this, but I didn't know that they do acquisitions. Or, I want to talk to them about, helping me through a transition or whatnot. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you, or get a hold of Shannon or Doug?
Yeah, just Google our company, Bentson Copple. It'll come up, and just dial the main number, and all of our schedules are managed by whoever answers this phone, and they'll find the most convenient time for us to talk. It doesn't cost you anything. When I'm in town and not on the road, all I do is talk on the phone all day. So, and it's a blast. And so, and that's what Shannon does as well. Doug's spending his time actually doing real work on transactions. So you probably won't get him, but you'll get Shannon or myself.
Perfect. And I just want to say this. For my docs that don't know this, you guys do list practices. So if they have an idea, if you're out there and you're thinking, I think I just want to do an acquisition, they can get onto your website or contact you guys, correct? And you can tell them where you have practices that could be a good fit for them, correct?
Absolutely. And we understand the confidential nature of all these conversations. And so we've been around for a long time and haven't messed that up. So you can be confident when you call us, it stays in the 4 walls of our building.
Yeah, that's great. All right. So as we finish up here, one of the ways I like to finish up my podcast is to just go through a little speed round with my guests. So
well, I have to know pop culture. I don't know pop culture.
Okay. Well, I won't ask you anything pop culture. So let's start with this. Describe your style in one word.
Quick start.
Interesting. Okay. What are you listening to or watching right now?
My wife, Dana, and I have watched every episode at least twice of Call the Midwife. It's on Netflix. It's my very favorite show to go to sleep to. The music is great in the background. The message is always awesome. If you're tired of the news and you don't want to shoot 'em up movie, I love that show. And even for men, it's awesome.
Oh, that's great. All right. What do you do just for you?
Oh, this will sound pretty boring. We live on a small tract of land, about 13 acres. I like to be by myself outside because I spend so much time talking to people on the phone. So 4 hours on a tractor mowing my grass is heaven for me.
I love that. And I can appreciate that. Do you have a hidden talent that you'd want to share with us?
Not many. I have genie wishes, but those aren't talents. Those are desires. I am not a good cook, but my dad was an amazing cook, and he's from the Midwest. His dad was a cattle farmer, and we always had a lot of beef in the house. And he taught me how to make béarnaise sauce and Caesar salad. And when we have that at my house, that's my call. And I'm the best béarnaise maker within a double boiler and a homemade Caesar salad. Those are probably my 2 best skills.
I love it. That's a great talent. And then finally, if you had a big, hairy, audacious goal for this year, or just, no time limit on it, and you wanted to share it with us, what would that be?
So this is supposed to be like learn to play the guitar, or learn a second language.
It could be, anything.
I tell you what it is. I have traveled every week of my career pretty much, minus a few, and it's probably January 1st of 2025. I'm not retiring, but I am getting off the podiums and off the road, and Doug and Shannon are going to buy my interest out, and they're going to give me a desk job. And that's to me audacious and hairy and scary, but exciting.
Yes.
And so they gave me a countdown calendar. I have 711 days until then. And,
I love that.
I'm not going away from the specialty, but
Sure.
it's time for me to be able to invest in some things, in town and do some volunteer work and also talk to orthodontists, but not be on the road. And you know what it's like to give a presentation. I mean, the
I do.
hours that it takes for the 1 hour that you give is
Yep.
and you don't get paid for these things
Yep.
very much.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep. For sure.
I'm gonna try to slow down and get out of the airplane. So that's pretty audacious for me. But 2 more years of me going hard, and then hopefully you guys won't see me that much anymore. I'm kind of a tired voice anyway.
Yeah, that I think that's a fantastic goal, and that is a hard one. I can speak to that from being the voice of my business. I know how hard that is, but congratulations on that. And you will be missed on the stage, but I know you're going to have great people following
But
right
what
up.
a great team I have too. Shannon and Doug, if you haven't met them, you will. They're incredible. And the people behind us are even more. So, this company is going to be around for a long time and do really, really great stuff.
Yep. Yep. Well, Chris, again, thank you so much for being on Hey Docs. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk next time. Okay.
Thanks, Jill.
Thank you. All right, everybody. What an exciting day.